Dr. Schwartz, thank you for talking with us. I wanted to ask you about your book, Places for Passion, to start with, because it combines two of our members' interests, romance, one, and travel, two. Why do you think it's important to get out of your normal routine or your normal location?
The reason we wrote Places for Passion, the 75 most romantic destinations in the world, is because in my own life, I have found that the best moments in a relationship, the really good moments in a relationship where you get to talk and you get to wonder and you get to explore and you have the time to think about who you are together, have always been on trips. And when I say trip, it doesn't have to be, 2 weeks. It could be a weekend. It could actually even be a day and a half away. It's not so much the time as the right space to be a couple in. I think when couples are at home, they get taken up by everyday stuff. You can be romantic at home. You could put together a candlelit dinner in your living room. There's nothing stopping you from that, and I admire and encourage that. But the phone's ringing, the dog's barking, you forgot to email someone about something important, you have to go shopping, or you're not going to be food in the house. I mean, there's a zillion things that start to be practical, and we all have those things to do, but that makes it very hard to segregate the romantic moment. So for me, the idea of travel is to get you out of all the things that drag you away from romance, to make romance, and sometimes sexuality, the heart and core of what you're planning on doing together. And it might just be something where you're walking along a new street that you haven't been on before and window shopping. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic, but it has to be just the two of you, unencumbered by daily life.
And what do you think being in a different place does for people's romantic life or sexuality? Is there a hormonal difference just being somewhere different?
I think sex, like everything else, becomes kind of numbed by the everydayness of it. Oh, it's 11 o'clock and we just turned off the news and this might be our moment to make love. And that's not bad, but it's not exactly anticipation and excitement and feeling particularly warm and cozy. And I think we forget that we need to be warmed up, seduced, anticipate, in a pleasure-type mood. So yes, we can have sex under a number of circumstances, thank goodness. But if you forget about seduction, you forget about something that's really quite wonderful, and it just changes the experience. Even if it's just talking over a candlelit dinner in a quiet corner of a restaurant and reminiscing about other good times you've had together, that's sexual play, that's anticipation, that's seduction. That makes sex something a little bit bigger and better than it normally is. And so I say, why deprive yourself from those moments?
When you say get away, what are the important components to that? What are the elements that make for good romance?
Well, I think we're an animal that likes diversity and newness. I mean, after all, why do we buy a new shirt or a new dress when we have a perfectly good one in the closet, right? Because it's fun to see something new and wear something new and to be delighted at how we look in something new. So travel is a little bit of that. We're delighting our eye, we're opening up our mind to experience. And if it's something that's the same thing we do every day, it just doesn't have that impact. So getting away means sort of breaking from your everyday routine in your everyday bed with your everyday TV program. It doesn't mean that's bad, it just means you get a whole big jolt of romance and excitement from something new that just doesn't work with the things you do every day. I also think that it's important to be able to release some time and thought to be special to one another. You can't be romantic every day. Although I do think it's important for couples to say, I love you every day and give compliments and all that. I really do. But sometimes you just aren't thinking about it unless you go away. And then you think, gosh, you look beautiful in that. Or you have such a great sense of humor. We haven't laughed this hard in years. That kind of thing, where you your very newness in the circumstance and your separation from work and grandchildren or children or even your dogs or things like that allow you to focus and think in a different kind of way. And I think we all like something special too. I mean, the fact is it's not a shock anymore to go back to a hotel room and they might have a bubble bath in it and sprinkle some flowers over, some rose petals over it. It's not that that's so unique anymore, but it's still really nice to walk into a bathroom where that's been prepared for you. Or to come into a hotel room and there's a split of champagne. Or one of you remembered to put a really nice card for the other person. So when they went to the bed, there was this really warm, loving card that said, I love you and I'm so glad we're here this weekend. Little things make a big difference, and we all like to know that somebody thought about us, and even if the management has prepared something like a couple of chocolate dipped strawberries when the evening's over. It's the little things that make you say, oh, we're having a special experience, and feeling warm and toasty about all that.
Can you recommend any examples here in Washington State of the kind of place you're talking about?
Well, as you might imagine in my book, Places for Passion, because I'm a Washington resident, I have spent a lot of time looking over this state for wonderful places to go. One of them is very close to my home, the Salish Hotel, which is so romantic. It has huge two-person soaking tubs that you can open up the screen so that you can see the fireplace, which is a real fireplace. You're right over rushing falls, and I particularly like it in the winter when the falls are full and tumultuous, and they're just so romantic. And they're all lit up at night. They have a really great restaurant. You can get a private room to eat in right next to the window. I mean, and they're great places to walk, so I love that. But, you name the part of the state. I just got back from the Methow Valley, which is wonderful for cross-country skiing, not so expensive. A variety of places from inexpensive to quite luxe in the area. You could go to Mazama, which is nearby. Mazama Country Inn is just a fabulous place. But the Freestone Inn there is beautiful and wonderful food. There's the San Juans. There's just getting on a ferry and going on over to Bainbridge or Vashon and tootling around. I have fabulous one nights myself, sometimes just going out to Woodinville and staying at the Willows Lodge there, or just going around and having a couple wine tastings. There's an enormous amount of romantic possibilities in this state. I haven't even begun to cover them. I'm a big fan of Walla Walla. It's an hour flight, and you can get a round-trip flight to Walla Walla for under $150. You can find wonderful places to stay there, right in town at the Whitman Hotel, where they do a beautiful job, or these great B&Bs all over the place. And I think we're very lucky because we have a romantic environment, beautiful mountains and trees and water. You can just go down to almost any of our waterfront places and have a great night just looking out, at the sunset or sunrise, depending on which side you're looking at. Even just taking a walk around Green Lake. It's a really lovely place, and it doesn't cost you a penny. I think the tough part is almost thinking about it and scheduling it, but the choices are huge.
So switching gears a little bit, what do you think changes about sexuality and romance as we age? What are the things that you've found?
I think there's good news and bad news about what changes about relationships as we age. The good news, I think, is you appreciate each other more. And I think we're not as tough on things like an extra 20 pounds, or I think there's a kind of sweetness about understanding our problems together. Oh, I know you can't see so well, or, I know you need a nap around this time of day, and stuff like that. I mean, it's a very sweet, I think, more compassionate and more grateful time of life if it's all working well. I do think some people get stuck in their ways. They don't change it up as much as they should. Some people just can't deal with the fact that their body doesn't look like it used to, and sometimes it inhibits them enjoying sex or taking their clothes off, things like that. We can run into some serious medical issues where we have to take medications that sometimes interrupt our emotional feelings or our sexual feelings because of the chemistry of those medications. I mean, Betty Davis said old age isn't for sissies, and we find that out all the time. But nonetheless, I think it can be a particularly touching time of life for couples, or even for new love. I've been involved with online dating on and off as a professional, and I do a lot of workshops for relationships, and people talk to me about their relationships. And I must say, when older people find somebody, they're so thrilled, and they're so good to each other. So I love new relationships among older people. I think those are particularly touching. And then, of course, you win the lottery if you're in a lifetime marriage or companionship or same-sex relationship, whatever it is, where the two of you found each other early and grew together and stayed together. I mean, there are a few couples I know like that where they're just enviable.
What do you find that people are worried about in their relationships or their sexuality as they age, whether they're married or dating or in a relationship? What kind of things do you hear about most commonly?
Well, I think people who are married worry about losing each other and worry about, they're so used to being with somebody. The idea of being alone is terrifying. Even if it's not a great relationship, and if it is, then all the more terrified of losing each other. I think as people get older, they worry that one of them will not be sane as long as the other, and how will they deal with that? People worry about running out of money. To the extent that money is an issue, it can be a very big issue, and it can be the thing that gets in the middle of everything. Can we afford to keep this car? Or can we afford to live in the same house we've always lived in? Those things take their toll on relationship if they're some kind of crisis, for sure. I think older people sometimes get isolated, particularly if they don't have a partner. And I think if they're single, they often lose faith in themselves as a admirable or desirable partner. I often find people their own worst enemy about finding a partner because they say, oh, well, I'm 50 pounds overweight, who'd want me? Well, there's somebody else out there who's 50 pounds overweight, and they think it's just fine, we get intimidated by all the glitzy, slick ads on dating and getting together, and most people are neither glitzy nor slick, and there's somebody out there for them. I think people who haven't dated in a very long time feel like, oh my goodness, I just can't do this. And I think that's a worry that's obsolete. Yes, you can do it. And there's lots of help online and offline for that. In terms of older people, I think it's a challenge with physical issues. My mother used to say the most important thing is your health, but you can't really understand that until you get older, because you take health as a birthright when, of course, it continues to be a challenge over a lifetime for some people, not much, for other people, huge. And so depending on your health, mental and physical, that's a huge thing that can enter a relationship. But for me, the thing is, do people grow, and can they accept change? We're not very good with change. We don't like change. I'm not so great at it either, so let me not say I've got this thing knocked. But one of the changes could be that you don't hear so well. And I think it's very frustrating for couples to say, what'd you say, and they can get annoyed with each other, even though they know that there's decreasing auditory ability in one or both partners. So you have to say, okay, we don't hear each other as well. We're going to have to talk louder. We're going to have to face each other when we're talking. We have to not get annoyed if we repeat it. And maybe we have to go and see what science is available. Maybe there's some new ways to help this that we haven't considered before because we're still thinking of what it was like 20 years ago, right? I think AARP is great at bringing some of these, not just issues, but solutions to their members. But you have to get up and gear up and do something because otherwise nothing's going to happen in terms of making those changes easier or better for you. So I think as we get older, a lot of the things we took for granted don't snap in the way they used to, and probably one of the things people worry about is meeting those changes and either accepting them or dealing with them, and hopefully having either the emotional or financial resources to take care of each other.
And in the physical changes with aging, I mean, we see a lot of ads for products to help with sort of the effects of aging on sexuality. Are there things that everybody deals with, and are there solutions?
Well, sexually, just about everybody has to deal with changes in the body that require intervention. For women, their loss of estrogen is going to make it a much drier experience for them, and they're going to need artificial lubrication, and sometimes they might need additional estrogen so that intercourse isn't painful, or even touching themselves isn't painful. It affects people different ways. For some people, it's an easy fix. For other people, those tissues are very fragile and they have to have some medical help on these things. But for women, that's likely. In fact, I would say over time, it's going to be 100% likely. And I'm so shocked sometimes women who haven't, tried a lubricant. There's so many out there, and there are issues. There are even specific medications like Replens where it will plump the tissues up, not just make them slicker. There's probably all kinds of other medications. That one's OTC, so I know about it more. But there's a lot of things I think that doctors can recommend, including topical estrogen. So that's one thing for women, for sure. And for men, it's the hydraulics of their penis do not work not just as automatically as they used to, but the blood doesn't get pushed in as efficiently. And for many men, they have to get used to the idea of having an erection that is not as hard as it was when they were younger. For some men, they can take Viagra, Levitra, whatever the other kinds of medicines are. Not all men can do that, depending on heart issues, et cetera, that their physician will work with them on to see what's a good solution for them. But there are solutions for them, some of which are a little bit scary to guys, like having shots that go into the penile cavities that bring the blood to the penis. But I could just feel guys going, ooh, ew, but most of the guys who use that can't even feel it. It's like you ever get a flu shot where you go like, okay, I'm ready for the shot and it's done. There's a lot of things that can be done, but the fact is that at least sexually, men's and women's bodies are going to change as they age, and they need to step up and do things about it as opposed to pretend it's not happening, or that they're closed down, business is done. And maybe that's not so terrible if both people feel that way, but usually both people don't feel that way. So those things happen physically. Then there are the sort of mechanical things like bad hips, bad backs. People have to think, okay, maybe I can't have sex the way I used to because it hurts my back. So which way can you do otherwise? Or used to take long walks together, and now backs hurt and you have to have some Advil or Tylenol before you go on. We have erosion of the pad of our foot gets thinner, and you have to deal with that. So maybe you used to hike 5 miles, maybe you hike 2 miles. But what has to happen is you just change, as opposed to you say, that's done for me. I probably think the biggest issue for a lot of people is depression. And I can't even imagine how many people in this country are medicated in some kind of mood mediator, many of which people need. But those medicines have to be carefully calibrated because they can make you into a zombie, where you're not feeling anything and you have no sexual desire and all of that. I think it's really important to say to your doctor, yes, I need help with these moods I have, but help me take care of the rest of who I am, my interest level, my energy level, my sexual interest, and let's work to see what's the lowest and best combination of medications I can take. I think a lot of people, as they get older, they're taking a lot of medications, they start to interact with each other, and they haven't let their physician know that this guy did this thing and that woman did that thing for them. They need to be their own advocate or have a partner who helps them be an advocate in the various things that they need to use to feel better and to operate within the modifications of their body that have happened. I think if we're reasonable and practical and we're not embarrassed and we look for help, that most of this we can do just fine, but you have to believe in it and you have to do things. You have to get off your butt.
In your opinion, do the medical solutions, and for men especially, the drugs that are available, do you think they work?
The Cialis, Levitra, Viagra, God knows what else is out there, work great for most people. Now, there might be something where a chemical compound of one, Cialis, doesn't work so well for you, and you try Viagra. It may be that you've had a prostate operation that has ruined a lot of your nerve ability to have an erection. Well, you may be able to have an insertable pump because you will still have skin arousal, the nerves will still be exciting, and you would be able to penetrate your partner. I mean, these aren't the things we grew up hoping for, but they are here to help us. There are very few men that can't be helped in one of the maybe 10 ways that they can help penises have erections. And most women can have lubrication or hormonal therapy that will help them enjoy their own genitalia and their own sexual arousal. So yes, these are not like the herbal additives that say, do this and you'll be a stallion. I'm very, very cautious about all of the supplement stuff that will help. And unfortunately, most of those things are not regulated by the FDA. I have yet to see large corporate brands on most of those things. And when they do, I would be more comfortable because most of the big brands, are protecting their brand, and they don't try and put something in that's absolutely not useful. But yeah, I think there's a lot of charlatan type sales out there, and I'm a big fan of going with a known brand that and a known doctor and a known medical clinic where you feel like they prove themselves over time in many other categories.
And could I ask you, what do you think is the best thing about dating after 50? I mean, what do you think the upside is?
Well, I feel like one of those people in a commercial is like, not only do I sell hair pieces, but I use hair, whatever. And so I have worked both as a professional in the dating industry, but I also found my fiance online. So I feel like I know it inside and out, right? And I think the best thing about dating after 50 is what dating has always done for anybody at any age, which is discovery, meeting new people, having new experiences, and having your heart touched. I think the thing that surprises most people who date over 50 and find someone is that their falling in love and their desire is no less passionate than it ever was. They could be just as silly and stupid about love as they ever were. That's kind of a sad discovery sometimes, in the sense that it may be the wrong person or it didn't work out. But on the good side, it can be just as euphoric as it ever was. And that love does not, have a... It's not something that has an expiration date, I know personally a couple that met each other in their early 80s. They're still together 7 or 8 years later, and they are really seriously in love. They're always holding hands. They're always looking at each other with these, pie-eyed looks, and they travel together, and they are stunned at how important this relationship is to them. And both of them had great long marriages with partners who sadly passed. They thought it was over for them. It wasn't over for them. And it wasn't any less amazing this time around. I think we talk ourselves into, what an age means. It doesn't have to mean anything we don't want it to mean if we have the strength of our convictions that we're going to be who we want to be at these ages, and we're going to go after what we want to go after. So the best part of being in love after 50 is that it's as good as it ever was. it's even better maybe in the sense that you know yourself more, you feel better about yourself, you're more comfortable with your deficits. Here I am, and I'm pretty good, and so what if I've got a pot belly or whatever? I'm still great, and I fully expect someone to love me with that, no problem, And if we've made that personal growth in ourselves, we are good to go. I think sometimes we've lost some of our confidence because we haven't been out and about and we have to regain it, but we can.
And on the flip side, what are the kind of challenges or downsides that you hear about?
Well, some of the challenges of dating, the downside is going out on a date with someone who's like icky. And there you are, you're with somebody you don't want to be with. And that was never fun to begin with, but I think sometimes when we're older we have less patience. Like, why am I wasting my time on this, right? I always say treat it like an anthropologist. Learn somebody's story, enjoy finding out who they are. Even if there's not a chance in hell you'd want to have a second date, you can probably find out something interesting on that person the first time and get a little bit wiser about how they live. So you have to put a frame around it so that every time you have an icky person in front of you, or maybe they're not icky, they're just wrong for you or you're wrong for them, you can take it and think about it and see what you learn from it. And, rejection's not any more fun than it ever was. Let's say you think they're great and they don't think you're great. You have to say, well, I just wasn't this person's ice cream flavor. They like strawberry. I'm not strawberry. It doesn't mean I'm not great. It just means I need to find someone who likes chocolate, right? So I feel that it's always an ego-sensitive practice with dating, and you have to have your act together and believe in yourself and not let somebody's rejection or your lack of ability to find someone for a while. You have to be determined. It's a job to find someone. It's kind of like what I say is somebody says, well, I used to get this, I've had 3 dates, they were all awful, I'm done. And I was saying, if you were looking at a job when you were 25 and you had 3 interviews and they didn't work out, would you say, that's it? I'm not going to work for the rest of my life? You would re-up because you have to work, you want to work, you will find something. And that's the way you have to be about dating. Okay, I don't care how many bad dates or non-dates or whatever, there will be one that will work out if you stick at it. So that's the tough thing, like going, okay, I've been doing this too long, I should have found someone. You will, but it might not be on the time schedule you had sort of fantasized about what it would be, like, oh, I'll give it 6 months. It might be a year, but it might be worth it. I think so. Sometimes we go through years of bad jobs to get to our great job. You've got to have some fortitude for dating. You do. And no one said it'd be easy. In fact, if it was so fabulous and so easy, nobody would stop. Why get married? This is so much fun, Now, dating makes you prepared to do the work for marriage, or living together someone or some kind of committed relationship. I'm a big romantic. I believe in love. I believe that when we're with a partner, we're our potential for our very best self, for our best understanding of ourselves, and for the most fun reception of the world. If we can't always have a partner, we've lost them for various reasons, whether it's divorce or death, it doesn't mean we should stop trying. I know we can have hugely satisfying lives with our friends, with our children, with our grandchildren. It's not all or nothing on relationships. But it's sort of like life with or without dessert, There's something very sweet about dessert, and none of us will die or not have a good life if we never have another dessert, but I'd try very hard to get more desserts in my life.
What do you think is different for people who are getting back in the dating pool now? Like people who may have been dating, 30 years ago. I know some people who are in that situation, who've been married or, whatever their situation is, and now they're out on the dating scene and trying to meet somebody, and they're finding it challenging. And I'm wondering what you think the differences are and how people can navigate sort of the new world of dating, being a little older than they were.
Well, I think when you date when you're older, first of all, you have a fully articulated life. You're not waiting for life to begin. You've been in it. And then you look at, oh my God, I have to explain my children, and I have to explain my house, and I have to make dinner for somebody, or I have to take someone out. I mean, it's things you haven't had to do for a long time, and it feels odd. I mean, you're reaching back into 30 years ago, or 50 years ago for that matter, and it feels both unfamiliar and familiar, and you go like, how can I be doing this again? So there's all of that. Putting out the new work for telling someone who you are, finding out who they are, going through that dance of deciding if you care to go further and invest more. So yeah, that's hard, and you've learned how to get along with somebody you know very well, but you've forgotten how to flirt. You've forgotten how to entertain someone. You've forgotten what to do. You don't know how to deal with your kids and their response. I mean, it's new. It's so long ago that you've done this that it's all kind of new and yet familiar in a way. And there your 70-year-old self is kind of having to think about your 20-year-old self, and the same activity that you did then, you're doing now. It's a little bizarre, but it's another kind of adventure, and that's how you have to see it.
Do you think there's any difference when you're older in what makes you attractive to a partner that you may be attracted to? Do you think there's, obviously maybe looks are more important when people are younger, but I think a lot of people want to know, what they can do to be attractive, or what someone what they're interested in is looking for?
Well, I think in an older partner, I think most men and women are not expecting that person to look like they're 40, or much less younger. They may not have adjusted their vision of what's attractive to someone older, so they have to learn that. I mean, if you're a 70-year-old good-looking man, you're still not as good-looking as you probably were in classic terms when you were 30 years younger. Do most people know how to calibrate for who they are now and what they look like and what the other person does? A lot of them do, but for some reason, for some people, no, they haven't adjusted. They really can't find that older person sexually attractive. But I feel that more people can than can't. Now, what are the things that would help? Obviously, not being very overweight, because a lot of extra weight is somewhat distorting. You can be 30, 40 pounds overweight and still look like yourself, but after a while it gets, not only does it not look attractive, you can't do as much. It's not very sexy to hear somebody panting by just going up a few stairs, or not able to, walk across the street to get something, or run, or be physical. I mean, the more fit you are, I'm not talking about skinny or even slim, but more fit, and have a sort of orderly shape, that's going to help. I think women are used to men losing their hair. They start doing it way before, their 70s and 80s. A lot of men lost their hair in their 20s. So that's something that I think people take. I think women are somewhat often embarrassed about, the fact that their breasts don't stand high in their chest anymore, or, their butt isn't as great it was when they were a cheerleader, all that. But I think they forget how excited partners can be just by the female body, and it doesn't have to look perfect. It's still a female body. It still has its curves and its lusciousness to it. And I think many women understand the male body has changed. So I think the question is, do you keep your hygiene up? Do you keep your energy level up? Do you put your personality out there, or wait for somebody to entertain you? I mean, there's a lot of things that have sexuality in them, which are energy, focus, cleanliness, respect for the other person, come dressed nicely, brush your teeth, use a dandruff shampoo. I mean, these aren't like cosmetic surgery things. These are showing respect for the other person by looking the best you can and showing that you put the effort in for that person. I think people forget things like sort of bad breath or body odor. They can be like a gateway situation, and if they haven't taken care of that because they've forgotten, they're not used to spiffing up, that they think they may have been rejected for how they looked rather than the fact that there was something about their body that was interceding and making them unpleasant to be with. It didn't have to be that way, you know? I think sometimes people have this image of what they should look like, and they let it change everything about them so that they're not particularly interesting to meet because everything about them looks defeated and unpleasant and awkward and unhappy. You know, just big, warm smiles go a long way. I mean, I think a lot of what men and women are looking for is someone who isn't bitter, someone who's happy, someone who's warm, someone who's sharing their world. I think that's going to make someone interesting, and I don't care. I mean, I would say one of the things that I'd say to women is that men, I think, are much more generous about weight and looks at these older ages than they were in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, when I think the requirements were much more rigid. I think now people are looking for who would be great for me to spend my days with, and is this person going to enhance my good mood and my good times and my good health? And those things are going to be the entry-level requirements, not, you know, what a 24-inch waist meant 50 years ago.
You touched on this in your answer, but I'll ask it again or a different way. What do you think maybe the number one or the top things that people can do to be more attractive?
Well, I think, let me take it differently for men and women. I think what men can do to be very attractive is to be respectful. That means being on time, being where you're supposed to be at the time you're supposed to be there, picking a nice place, dressing well, cleaning up, looking interested, not looking at their cell phone, not looking over the room, focusing on the person, suggesting an interesting thing to do, being complimentary. You know, the things that we call being a gentleman. It sounds sort of old-fashioned, but I think that's what women want. They want to know that this person is with them, focused on them, taking them someplace nice, acting in a way that's reassuring, you know, presenting themselves, look like they put a little effort into themselves, and not just talking about themselves, finding out about who they are. That will make somebody attractive. And, you know, making sure your nails are clean. I mean, little things like that make a huge difference. And if you're not even sure what those are, then somebody should get like a wingman to say, okay, here's a checklist, right? I wrote this book with AARP called Dating After 50 for Dummies, and there are lots of checklists in that book for people who are older who aren't quite sure how to look good for somebody, you know, or what to say. It's all in there, believe me. For women, I think they have to be warm and friendly and smiley. I think they have no idea how terrified men are about finding someone who's bitter or angry. You know, they talk about baggage. They don't want to hear about her ex-husband and, you know, either he was a saint or a sinner. They want to know that it's about them. They want the woman to do the same kinds of hygiene things that a woman would expect of a man. I think they just want to make sure that this woman is really in the present and not in the past. They want to make sure that she's interested in them and not the fact that they might be able to help her with her mortgage. I think both men and women are very worried about being with someone who just wants another economic contribution and not an emotional relationship. I believe that men want somebody who will look them in the eye and be interested in them, and who will not just talk about themselves. Everybody wants somebody who can lead them to an interesting conversation and an animated conversation, as opposed to either not talk at all or, you know, have a monologue for the 30-minute coffee date. So I think that there's a lot in common, but I think things like not trying too hard. I often see sometimes women take these pictures where there's just lots of cleavage showing, and I think for the kind of guy you want, maybe that's not such a great idea. And he can get like, oh my gosh, what does she expect of me, right? You're not looking at guys who are running around looking for one-night stands. They won't, for the most part, and this is a good news, For the most part, the men out there who are over 50 are looking for someone stable, warm, interesting to be with, interested in them, independent, but not so much that they don't need anybody, but independent enough so they feel like they're not being used as a prop. And I think those are not so different from what women want from men. I think that if a woman is very heavy, it'll be a problem. I sometimes feel like if a man had a choice between a woman with two heads with a great figure and one head is overweight, they'd pick the woman with two heads. So the fact is that if you're grossly overweight, there's probably something you need to do about that first. But if you think that you have to be a certain kind of body, no, you don't. You just have to be somebody who looks like they take pride in themselves, both male and female, and that they are going to try to look good for you and be interested in you.
What about people, and I know this is kind of a little more stereotypically true for men than for women, but somebody who thinks they want a partner younger than themselves or maybe younger than the partner they had. And do you think that's viable? Do you think that's realistic? Do you think that's a good idea? What would be your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's really interesting that everybody thinks they look younger than they are, and many of them are. And everybody thinks that they need someone younger because they're so energetic and wonderful. And it pisses me off, really, because it's such age prejudice among the people who should know better. The fact is that, particularly when you're looking at older people, they sort very differently in any given age group. So that 70 on one person is not 70 in another. And you could get somebody with a whole lot less energy at 55 than at 70, depending on the human being. And I have to fight this with people all the time, particularly when I was involved in the online dating industry so much, which is like, don't make a prejudge. Look at the person and see who they are. I mean, I've met men in their 80s who were more fun to be with than a guy 20 years younger. Now, granted, there are some differences that, are going to catch up with you. But I think this whole thing about presuming that the person has to be younger is ridiculous. And then I do think that some people will make great relationships with great age gaps. I know women who are 25 years younger than their husbands, and those relationships work. Of course, now when he gets a lot older, they're going to have problems that they wouldn't have faced for 20 years earlier. I mean, so pay now, pay later, right? But I understand that there are some relationships, pardon me, some relationships that are worth the age gap, I know a man who was married to a woman 20 years older than him, which is much more unusual. Anything's possible. What I'm saying, though, is to make age a selector so that you won't look at anyone who's your age or a little bit older, I think is unwise. And I think it really depends so much on the person. And it really makes me sad when older people use the same age prejudice against each other that they complain about in jobs and in other venues. Look around you. Look at the people you admire. You'll find that they're very different in the same age group. And I think that men are somewhat more guilty of this than women, but I cannot tell you how many women say, no, all the men I met in my age group are not what I want. Well, okay, look for younger men and see if you're what they want. But age prejudice is going to work both ways. I think it's nice when age isn't the issue, but it's who you are together. But of course, that has its limits too. I mean, the fact is, particularly as we get older, 10 years is going to make a big difference. And if he's saying, okay, I'm 60 and I want a 50-year-old, he has to remember that the 50-year-old's going like, why would I want a 60-year-old? There was a terrible study, well, it was a good study with a terrible outcome to show that the more money a man made, the more years younger he could get a partner, So the good news about that is, okay, if you have a lot of money, you're going to attract somebody younger. And the bad news is, why is she attracted to you? And how long is that going to last? Love is an interesting thing because of its interaction with money and status and lifestyle. These things are a big mix, and they require a little bit of caution because I think you really want someone who knows who you are and is loyal to you.
What do you think about online dating or using the internet or apps on your phone or, the whole world of the internet for finding a partner or for dating?
I definitely recommend online dating, particularly for older people, for one solid reason. They're not meeting people other ways. I mean, occasionally you'll be at a cocktail party and somebody's grandchild will say, oh, you should meet, my granddad. Or they will be at a senior center, or they will be out working and they'll meet somebody, or they'll be at a dinner party. People meet those ways. But the fact is most don't. People stop being in social situations where they're meeting a lot of new people. And so the great thing about online dating is it puts you in networks you wouldn't ordinarily be in. I know that my fiance and I would never have met each other. He's in the sciences, he's a patent attorney, engineer background. I'm a social scientist. I can't add, not that bad, but it's just a world that's a parallel world. I just wouldn't have met those people. So I think that's the thing about online dating. You can meet the people that you wouldn't bump into, that no one you know knows. What
do you think is a good idea for a first date to propose, whether it's, movie, sport event? What sort of thing, for somebody who's looking for an idea to ask somebody out? Do you have any recommendations?
I think a great date is to go to an early movie and then go to dinner afterwards. Because the nice thing about the movie is you have something to talk about that isn't just your ex or, something about your biography. That can come up, but people often feel like they have to download every bit of their biography too soon, and it's like work, right? So I would say figure out a movie you're both interested in, go see it, and then discuss it. And it can bring up other kinds of themes, but it gives you something to do.
What do you think about people hooking up with people from their past, like their high school sweetheart or something, whether through Facebook or high school reunions or something? I actually know a few people who have done that, and it seems to be working out. Do you see that in your work?
I always think that there's a special tie to our past, and when people go to reunions or look someone up on Facebook, I think that's a good idea. Now, you have to be careful because that person may be happily married or may not think of you as nostalgically as you think of them, so you have to be cautious. But I think it's fun just to reunite with someone you've been thinking about, and even if it only turns into what's your life like these days, and they talk about their thrillingly happy marriage and their 4,000 grandchildren, okay, that's not going to be an opening for you. But sometimes that person is really delighted to hear from you. And there really is a lot to think about and be nostalgic about, and there's an easy tie-in. So I think it's fine. Just make no assumptions about that person's interest in you or their availability. But I think it's great to reach out in a number of ways. At the very least, you find out about someone's life, and at the most, maybe there's still a live connection there.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. This has been really interesting. Is there anything I haven't asked you about the world of dating in the ARP age group? Is there anything I haven't asked you that you think is important or that people need to know?
I do think that the biggest issue about dating is committing to do it and doing something. Obviously, I wrote a book, Dating After 50 for Dummies, where I felt it could help people make those first steps. But if that's not the way that you get yourself prepped for something, find a friend who will be your wingman or wingwoman. Go online, have them help you do a profile, look at your picture, give you some feedback so that you feel like you're doing it the right way and they save you from any bad mistake. Like, don't put a picture of you holding your grandchild. This is about you, right? Those kinds of things. Simple things people might not have thought about. I think the important thing as a single person is to put yourself out there and enjoy it and think of it as another phase of your life that is interesting. Not that you would have designed it this way, but here you are and you can enjoy it. And in terms of your relationship, I would say to keep tending to it. I think my book on romantic travel is really about tending to each other and keeping the romance and the interest and the newness, the sense of a world to explore with each other alive, and not getting trapped too much in your day-to-day rituals. Not that they aren't good, not that you're not having a good life, but there is something to going out there, having a new experience, seeing the world, even seeing your state, that really does benefit your heart, not just your romantic heart, but literally your joie de vivre, your health, your mental and your physical health. So, you know, I'm all about using every single bit of who we are and who we're with to enliven and enrich our lives. And I think that only we, for the most part, can do that for ourselves. We have to be an agent in behalf of ourselves and our relationship, or finding a new one. And so I hope that, you know, some of the value of this conversation is to kind of get people to re-up, whether it's in their relationship or in service of finding a partner, but to say, okay, I can do this.